Hello. This is going to be an orientation session on designing writing assignments using the Paves Off method. I'm Dr. Jessica Jorgensen Borkert, and I'm doing this from my home because we're in COVID-19. And so I thought it was important to make some videos to help guide you through creating your Writing to Learn courses. What's going to happen is I'm going to disappear and you will see a PowerPoint in front of you. I will go over that PowerPoint and then I'll show you a sample assignment for this. So just hang on for a minute. I'm going to disappear, but I wanted you to see me just in case you never have seen me before. And I'm going to start this PowerPoint slide for you. So this is, like I said, is talking about how to write a writing assignment. And we have a method, and you will see this in our best practices or orientation document that I've either emailed you or given to you in person. And we talk about creating writing assignments using the Paves Off method. And this was created by the previous WAC director, Dr. Don Judd, with Dr. Janet Zepernick. And this came out of research from other universities too. So we didn't just dream it up. It's actually something that is out there. So like I said, this video will go over this method of writing assignments. And what I want you to realize as I go over this is that thinking in this manner will help you create all kinds of different assignments, to be honest, not just writing assignments. So Paves Off stands for purpose, audience, voice, emphasis, support, organization, and format. And I will go over each one of these individually for you and then conclude with an example of setting an assignment up like this. Finally, realize these are recommendations. We don't require, as part of best practices, that you write your writing assignments in this style. For example, you could feel like, oh, maybe I'm repeating myself a lot in doing this. And you just decide to scrap some of these parts. Or you don't set it up like the sample that I go over. And all that's fine. But I think, talking about what the purpose of the assignment is, who the audience is, what kinds of support, organization, format issues are always things that students need to know in an assignment. And it helps them create better assignments overall. So when you think of a writing assignment, you want to think about those things, but you also want to think about the overall scenario for the assignment. For example, I teach technical and professional writing. Oftentimes I'll create an imaginary scenario, like a real life kind of professional scenario they have to respond to. They may have to write a business letter or create a memo. Other times I give them really real life scenarios, like they work with an outside client in the community to create a proposal or write a fundraising letter for a nonprofit. So think about whatever scenario you want to give them and be clear in what that scenario is. So you're going to see in my sample assignment, I do have a little assignment summary that shares that scenario. You will also want to share with them the purpose of the assignment. Why are they doing this? So whatever you want them to do, what is the purpose? And you can connect this sometimes to your overall course objectives too. So if one of the objectives is to, learn more about health risks for a certain group, maybe you can, take that larger objective for the course and par it down a little bit, compartmentalize it a little bit, make it a smaller component, and that could be your purpose. And I'll go through a sample of this in a minute in case I was really unclear. You also want to think about audience, who the document is for, as well as tone and writing style, and any kind of support students will need in order to back up any kind of claims they're making. And of course, citation will pop up in this. So we'll talk about all those things. One thing that I would recommend is when you think about a writing assignment, what's your purpose and what are some objectives you have? So what do you want students to gain from doing this assignment? Are they going to learn more about their community? Are they going to learn more about like a health risk that is happening within a certain community? What is going on? So make sure your purpose is clear to the students. Usually you want to keep this purpose statement that you have in your assignment probably one or two sentences. Try to be as concise yet clear as possible. And make sure your objectives for the assignment are measurable, or at least have some measure to it. I've noticed students really like it if you give them some kind of measurable objective they need to meet for the assignment. And that can also help you create your rubrics. And then once you have some clarity here, you can better meet those needs of your students. So an example of some clear criteria. Let's say you're asking them to write a research paper, just a standard academic one. You could ask for 5 sources cited in text and works cited. One thing I've learned, always tell them to cite in text and also in that works or reference page, because if they see just 5 sources, they might just list them at the end and you'll never see them engage with them in the paper. So be clear as you can on that. A thesis statement that identifies a claim the writer is making in one sentence, often located near the end of the introductory paragraph. So there you even told them they need a thesis statement. Here is where it goes. And then, of course, you have to think about audience considerations. So who is the assignment written toward? Audience can be real or imagined. So sometimes I'll just say the audience is me, but I try to imagine another outside audience. It might be classmates if they do peer review, for example, or it could be a community member or a much wider audience than that. So if you wanted to, you could create a section called, or a heading called primary audience, list that person or people, and then secondary audiences. And that could be anybody else who might have some, need some info from that document or have some access to it or also need that information for some reason. So I have a couple examples here for how to talk about audience. And the first example, students are writing a proposal to the City of Pittsburgh Mayor Don McNally. In the second example, I say, while I assess or grade your assignment for this task, realize your audience for the op-ed is anyone who is concerned about student safety at Pittsburgh State University. So you can imagine from that that it's going to be a large audience and they're going to have very different um, positions at the university, but I think students would be able to realize, and I think we all would realize, that everybody would have shared concerns. All those various and different audiences would have very similar concerns regarding student safety. So voice or tone, how you can talk about this. So voice is always one of those terms that I feel is a little vague. You think about voice in terms of creative writing, you think about voice, in other ways too. But I always try to pare that down as what persona should the writer of the essay take on? So, for example, is it a professional document? If so, they probably want to avoid colloquial or cliched language. They may have to use buzzwords that are important to that particular field or job. Sometimes the assignment may be more casual, and so maybe colloquial language there is fine. Or is it academic? So all these things will matter in terms of thinking about writing style and voice and tone. And I have a couple examples there. This essay is reflective, so it carries a more casual tone. Or this is a business letter to a client, so keep writing style professional. Avoid those colloquial language and cliches and use correct informal grammar. Emphasis is just the main idea of the writing assignment or the main point of that assignment. So sometimes I will actually leave this out if I feel it's also being discussed in the purpose, because I don't want to repeat myself too much or maybe possibly confuse a student. But an example would be the emphasis for this essay is to reflect on a recent learning experience. So, that could be an example for emphasis, but whatever the main point is of that essay or assignment. Support, it's probably a little bit more obvious to a lot of us what kinds of support are needed for the writing assignment so that the assignment can be successful, so that students can back up the claims they're making, is one way to think about that. So again, you could go back to that measurable objectives that I had talked about earlier and be very specific in how many sources you want students to use, where you want them to get those sources, and other information that may be beneficial in terms of support. Organization is one of the final parts of the Paves Off method, and that's just how will a student arrange or organize the assignment to effectively argue or support the main idea of the paper. So this may mean things like using headings or subheadings, or simply setting up the paper in MLA or APA format, but think about the purpose of the assignment, and so what kind of document should the student create because of that purpose, because of the audience they're writing to. In writing studies, we talk about this as genre. And so, genre, most students understand the term genre in terms of music and movies. In writing studies, we say all written documents take on some kind of socially constructed elements that help define the genre of that assignment. So think about a memo or a business letter. We all know a business letter when we look at one because we expect to see certain things in that letter. And so that's becomes a genre over time. It becomes repeated. There's been lots of business letters you've probably seen. And in my class, students write a couple different business letters. So they become very familiar with that genre. So an example is for this assignment, you'll create a memo with appropriate headings and subheadings. And you could be more specific than that too. And then finally, there's format. What are the expectations for the look of the assignment in terms of design and other formatting elements? So for example, could be as simple as MLA or APA format. You probably also want to think about length requirements for the paper. And then, of course, any other formatting considerations. Like some people really like certain fonts. They want students to use, Times New Roman or whatever. You can be very specific with that as well. And so I'm going to show you an example of how to set up an assignment using the Paves Off method. This is an older assignment, but I use the Paves Off's method in particular for this so that I could show it as an example. And you'll also see one similar to this in the documents that I gave you in the orientation packet. But you can see when I write an assignment right at the top, there I share the assignment title, what class it's for, my name, and then of course due dates. I always start with due dates so that students can easily find that information and know when the assignment is due. And then I also have points. And you can see this is an assignment that they do two different summary analysis assignments in my class. I don't teach the same assignment anymore, but I did back in 2018. So the purpose is stated there. You can read that. You see my purpose statement is a little longer, and that's just in part because this was meant to help describe two assignments in a fairly concise way so students didn't have to go to two different documents. The audience in this case was just me, but again, you can think about other audiences. You can think about secondary audiences. It's all up to you. The voice for this was academic. I'm trying to get them to practice academic writing in this assignment. An emphasis was the idea or main points, so I wrote about the focus of your writing should be to describe or summarize a fiction or nonfiction piece you read that has not been assigned for class. So another main point here is getting them to read other things outside of the class that I'm assigning. We all know that it's very hard to put in everything we would like to teach in a semester. And so this was an assignment I created to make that a little bit easier. Support, so I describe the kinds of support they will have to do. I describe you will have to give quotations and other evidence from the text with your analysis. I am very specific in that the summary should have none of this. Summary just needs to be in their own words. Organization, this I talked about, your essay should start with a 1 to 2 paragraph summary of the story. So right away, students followed that really well. They're like, oh yes. And so most were very clear in that 1 to 2 paragraph part for summary. And then of course the analysis. And for that I asked for 2 to 3 plus or more paragraphs. So that was kind of a way to give that measurable objective to the organization. And then format. Here I'm just talking about MLA style and citation just because it's an academic paper and in literature we use MLA. Below, I didn't really have this in my slideshow, but I always give them, well, I guess I did with a scenario. I always give them an assignment description or that overall scenario, what it is they're being asked to do. And this is usually 1 to 2 paragraphs, sometimes more depending upon how lengthy the scenario might be that I'm creating. Sometimes in my professional and technical writing classes, the scenarios get a little bit longer than 1 to 2 paragraphs. And at the bottom here, I do share examples of like how to write a summary, how to write an analysis. So giving them some examples will sometimes help students in terms of writing an assignment. So, and also this is taken from our orientation documents. So you can also find this information shared here as well. So thank you for listening. I try to keep these orientation videos as short as possible, so we're approaching the 15-minute mark. If you do have any questions, please contact me. Thank you.